launching this, the OnePlus 12, at the same time as this, the S24 Ultra, is a pretty ballsy move, or perhaps it's just coincidence. But how can the OnePlus 12 possibly stand out? Well, for starters, it's $500 or £400 cheaper than the S24 Ultra, which is nuts. It's even $200 less than the S24 Plus and the Pixel 8 Pro. And with this big Pro XDR 120Hz screen, with the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip, 12 or 16 gigs of RAM, 256 or 512 storage, a proper flagship triple camera system, although mostly borrowed from the excellent OnePlus Open. Oh, and we also get the biggest battery on any non-gaming phone. Inside here, somehow they've squeezed in a 5400 mAh cell. Well, technically two 2700s, a dual battery design, but 5400 versus 5,000 on the S24 Ultra versus 5,000 on last year's OnePlus 11. So it's like 8% bigger than the ultimate flagship phones. And we get much faster charging. So straight away, I'm pretty excited about the 12. And I'm also pleased to report that OnePlus will now offer 4 full OS updates. 4 years of Android with this guy. Not quite the 7 years we get with Samsung and Google for the Pixel phones, but I'll take it. However, one thing we're not hearing as much about with OnePlus is AI, which, to be fair, I'm pretty sick of hearing about it, but both Samsung and Google offer some pretty cool AI-powered features, like instant slow-mo, Photoshop-style generative fill, transcribing and translating, and it feels like you're getting just a bit more for your money. But if you're not too fussed about all that, then the OnePlus 12 is definitely worth considering. Which, until last year, with the 11, I hadn't said for a few years actually. I think we can all agree OnePlus kind of lost their way a little bit over the last few years. They got too expensive, the cameras never really kept up with the competition. They just became a bit sort of meh. But I think last year, with the cheaper 11 and also the OnePlus Open Foldable, which to be fair was just a rebranded Oppo Find N2, but still I maintain it was the best folding phone of the year. And so I reckon we're seeing the beginning of a return to form. But can the 12 keep that up? Well, let's start with the design. And this comes in 2 colors, boring and not boring. Okay, silky black or flowy emerald. Although it does look a little bit like a kitchen countertop. What do you think? Still, very similar style to last year's OnePlus 11. Let me have a little lean forward there. You can see we've got the triple camera setup on the back. It looks like you've got 4 cameras, but it's 3 plus the flash and laser autofocus. And not a hint of an Apple-inspired, Samsung-copied titanium frame inside. Still very much aluminium, although we do now get Gorilla Glass 5 on the back, and we have this sort of new matte textured feel to it, although they have increased the screen size from 6.7 to 6.82 inches, so it's a little bit bigger, but it's also a little bit heavier. 220 grams now, up from 205 last year, although that still makes it about the same as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But I do like the rounded corners, and versus the boxy S24 Ultra, it feels smaller and more comfortable to hold. Big fan of the alert slider, now on the left side, although I'd have preferred it if it was a little bit lower down to make it easier to reach. They've given the dual speakers a nice little upgrade. We get Dolby Atmos and a new 3D spatial audio option. So if you want to, you can now listen to different audio from different points around you. So perhaps your game sounds are coming from up front, music in the background, calls coming in from the left, notifications pinging you from the right. It's a full sensory overload 3D experience, although I haven't really found myself using it that much. Also not particularly sexy, as I've also been described, but they've added new antennas. So there's this new 360 antenna design, including 3 dedicated just to gaming, so you should see better and more reliable 5G and also Wi-Fi connectivity, including Wi-Fi 7, if you have a Wi-Fi 7 router, which you don't. Oh, and the best bit, we also get an IR blaster, which I know is very popular with a lot of people, so you can control your TV and AC units and various gadgets. They've also updated the USB-C port. OnePlus have also upgraded the water resistance. You can see where this is going. We've got IP65 now, up from 64 last year. And although that doesn't quite compete with the 68 water and dust resistance you get on, well, the S24 and most other flagships, this will survive, I hope, a little puddle of water, some rain like that. And they've actually added a new Aqua Touch feature, so it should mean the screen works better while wet. You can see that it's not missing a single press. So a little bit more durable, not quite as much as some of the flagship rivals, but an upgrade from the 11. Gorilla Glass 5 on the back, Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the front, which is nice, although not as nice as the new Gorilla Glass Armor that we have on the Samsung. And actually, if I pointed towards my little light here, it is much better at reducing those reflections. I think Corning say it's like 75% less reflective. You can barely make out the screen on the OnePlus, much easier to see on the Samsung. So while obviously this is $500 more, I'm a little bit spoiled now by this brighter and much less reflective screen. The good news though is we do also get a slightly brighter screen with the OnePlus. We're now talking 1600 nits of peak outdoor brightness, up from 1300 last year, and it can now hit a partial HDR peak of 4500 nits for those super bright highlights in your HDR photos and videos. It supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision, the latter of which of course is still missing from Samsung's phones and their TVs. And I do also appreciate the high PWM dimming, the 2160Hz PWM, which basically is the number of times, it's not like the screen refreshes, but it's like it's pulse width modulation. So basically at lower brightnesses especially, gonna get less eye strain. So when you're browsing Reddit or doom scrolling last thing at night with the brightness turned down and you're in bed, hopefully it'll give you less eye strain. It should give you less eye strain. And as I say, it's also a touch bigger, 6.82 inches with a fully dynamic 1 to 120Hz refresh rate. So it is a lovely screen, although I know these curved edges are not everyone's cup of tea. Obviously we now have this flat screen on the S24 Ultra, which does seem to be where the trend is heading, but I know a lot of people do still prefer curved screens. It looks and I think feels a touch more premium. So next question, how fast is this? Because yes, it comes with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, as all flagship Android phones do really, well except for the Vivo X100 Pro, that's the MediaTek chip. But if I grab my trusty OnePlus 11 and then open the specs pages, you can see here we've got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 versus the 8 Gen 3, also that bigger battery, the new cameras, and not listed is the all-new cooling system, which include dual vapor chambers. And according to OnePlus, this is the best cooling system they've ever made in their phones. Which you'd hope. I mean, it'd be weird if they said it wasn't as good as previous ones, but what they're saying is it's given them the headroom to actually boost the clock speeds a little bit on the 8 Gen 3 chip, and kind of like we've got with the custom 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy, which is sort of tuned by Qualcomm to be a bit faster on here, it should be pretty similar on this. Should be. Let's put it to the test. Okay, so OnePlus 11, OnePlus 12, S24 Ultra, all 8 Gen 3 phones, and we're looking at about a 10% uptick in single core, about 20 in multi-core, although you can see the S24 Ultra does come out on top here. But what about 3D Mark? This is a really demanding test. This sort of runs for 20 minutes using the GPU. So 3722 on the 11, going up to 5076 on the 12, about a 35% uptick. Although again, the S24 Ultra does win, and significantly in terms of stability. We've gone from a 65% stability down to just 53.5, and the S24 is at 61.4. Which means by the end of the 20-minute test, the 12 is only about 5% faster. It really is throttling quite significantly, and it's just not as smooth as you can see we've got on the S24 Ultra there. This has like twice the size vapor chamber as last year. Obviously we have a beefier cooling system in the 12 as well, but that's not great. Now, if we actually swipe down here, the 12 does win in terms of battery life. It used just 5%, same as the 11, whereas the S24 Ultra actually used 13% in this test. Although I have had other examples of the test where it's used a little bit less, but still, the 12 does seem to be lasting longer. It also has the biggest battery. However, I was having a little bit of trouble with that Geekbench test. The scores kept being really low on the 12 for some reason, until I realized that you actually have to turn on high performance mode in the battery settings to get those higher scores. And by default, this is off. So OnePlus are clearly prioritizing battery life, keeping the phone cool, over getting the peak performance of the chip. So while this is certainly very fast and a nice little upgrade over the 11, I still think the S24 Ultra is a smoother, faster, probably better gaming experience. On the plus side, the OnePlus side you might even say, they have added some very nifty new gaming options. Swiping down from the corner brings up the game menu, and from here you can turn on the new adaptive frame booster. A kind of frame generation, if you like, making any game feel like it's running at 120 FPS. Although it actually drops the native FPS to 40. So for less twitchy games like this, you'll definitely appreciate the smoother perceived refresh rate, but for multiplayer games, competitive shooters, instead I would turn on the new Hyper Response engine, which helps to reduce screen lag and increase response time, so your touch, when you press to shoot, it just feels more instant. You've got Hyper HDR to boost the brightness and the vibrancy, there's a resolution upscaling option to make it look a bit sharper, and your usual power modes, do not disturb, and various game settings. Bottom line though, the OnePlus 12 is exceptionally fast. With the new hardware, with the new algorithms and technologies, those game features, and at the heart of it, that Oxygen OS software, this still feels like one of, if not the fastest phones you can buy in terms of just how smooth and responsive it is. The one area it doesn't feel quite as fast, I have to say, if I bring in the S24 Ultra, is the shutter speed. Just the regular camera, 1x, and you can see the S24 is taking like twice as many photos as the OnePlus, which obviously is important if you're taking shots of your fast-moving kids or pets. So we'll come to the camera in a second, but shutter speed could be improved a little bit. But first we have to talk about this massive battery, all 5,400 milliamp hours of it. Compared to last year's OnePlus 11, you can expect a good 20% longer runtime with the 12, and so you can just about get away with 2 full days of use. I will of course be making a full battery comparison video. I am waiting on a couple more like the new Honor and Xiaomi flagship phones, but I reckon the 12 has a good chance to be in the top 3, if not even taking the crown. We also get their new SuperVOOC wired charger bundled in the box, which is always appreciated, and it's actually 100 watts here in the UK and around the world, although for my American friends it actually tops out at 80 watts over there. Either way, we're looking at a full charge in under half an hour, plus some very speedy wireless charging, up to 50 watts if you buy their AirVOOC charging pad, although no Qi 2 support sadly. So long battery life, fast charging, that's what we like to see, but let's talk about this camera, because this has always been the Achilles heel of OnePlus phones. Great specs, great value, lovely software, but the camera's always been a bit meh, I think is a technical term. So here we are with the OnePlus 12, and I can tell you, it's actually very good. It's largely just copy and paste from the OnePlus Open, the foldable phone, which actually had a fantastic camera, albeit with a few tweaks. 50 megapixel wide lens with a new Sony LYT808 1/1.4-inch sensor, which is a massive upgrade over the IMX890 1/1.56-inch sensor on last year's 11. And it's almost the same as the OnePlus Open, although we don't get the pixel stacking tech, although we do get a slightly bigger sensor. I also really like the look of the Hasselblad portrait mode, and also how you can change the default focal length of the wide lens. Very similar to the iPhone, but personally I really like that 35mm look. They've also beefed up the IR filter and improved the dynamic range of the sensor, and OnePlus and Hasselblad are very keen on offering a specific look to their camera. And I really like it. It feels a bit more filmic, a bit more unique than what I get from my Samsung or my iPhone. I've been having a great time with this so far. So you've got the main wide lens, and then that's paired with a 64 megapixel periscope telephoto, and this is identical to the Open. And again, a huge upgrade over last year's OnePlus 11 with a new, bigger sensor, and also double the megapixels. And it gives us a 3x optical and 6x in-sensor zoom, which should be near lossless, just without the 4:1 pixel binning advantage you get from the native 3x optical. And while yes, the S24 Ultra packs in an extra lens, and I would still say is the zoom king overall, it is significantly more expensive, and the OnePlus isn't far behind. And to complete the trio, we then have a 48 megapixel ultra-wide, which actually is a bit disappointing because it's basically the same as last year's OnePlus 11, which was pretty similar to the year before, and it's using the same aging IMX766 sensor. It does the job, but I'd hope they put a bit more effort into this one. And then up front, we have a new 32 megapixel selfie, which is also doubled from last year's 16 megapixels. Overall, I think it is a terrific camera system, and given the price, it's hard to beat. Okay, so let's wrap up. And the OnePlus 12 is a terrific phone. It really, really is. The price definitely makes it a lot more competitive as well. I really like the screen, the design, the specs, the camera's fantastic. It does everything you need, really. And I think, again, for that price, $799, £849, it's very hard to beat this. I think maybe the Pixel 8 Pro or the S24 Plus would be its sort of closest competitors. Certainly, it's a lot cheaper than the S24 Ultra, almost putting it in a completely different category. And I think unless you do want some of the AI features, the S Pen, the slightly better all-round camera system, and maybe the Galaxy ecosystem, it's a tough sell to spend almost half as much money again on this. What I would say though is it does feel like we're missing something. It's a nice little hardware refresh, the software's still great, but it would have been nice to have some of those sort of new cool AI features, especially for the camera. But there isn't really anything to sort of hang your hat on except for perhaps the price and being a good all-rounder. But that is not a deal breaker by any stretch. But what do you reckon? Do you think OnePlus have turned it around? Could you be tempted to buy the 12 or not for you? Let me know what you make of this in the comments below, and also if you've got any questions, drop a comment. And I am also working on a whole bunch of other videos and comparisons that you may find interesting. So hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.